future Social Security COLAs as per the trustees report of 2024. So we're going to look at this here. Make sure I got my messy hair in there. Oh, yeah. I dyed my hair. Looking good. I got something. Anyway, so we're going to look at this. I find this of interest, and you should too, because this is going to affect your bottom line, amigos. All right, so we're just going to look at this, the trustees report. I got lots of highlights here you can see. And we're going to start with economic, maybe we'll start here. Economic assumptions and methods. I find this stuff enjoyable. It's weird. I get it. Weird. The intermediate, so remember, there's three things they're looking at. The intermediate is 50% of the 100% probability. All right, low cost and high cost are each 25%. So you get 25% on the low cost, 50% on intermediate, and 25% on high cost. High cost means it costs more to fund Social Security, which means it's more bankrupt likely, if that makes sense. All right, so let's keep going here. So the intermediate assumptions reflect stronger than expected economic growth in 2023. They had written this in the end, towards the end of the third quarter of 2023. All right. And the trustees' expectations of a brief period of slower growth in 24 and 25, steady growth thereafter, and their best estimates for other economic parameters. The low-cost assumptions represent a more optimistic outlook, maintaining a higher level of economic output, stronger long-term economic growth, and relatively optimistic levels for other parameters. All right, that's low cost, good economic growth, high level of economic output, stronger long-term economic growth. The high-cost assumptions represent a more pessimistic scenario. All right, so low cost, as I did a video earlier today when I was driving to Lowe's, low cost assumes high growth, high inflation, high because inflation is reflected by what? Higher earnings growth year over year. All right, so high inflation, high growth, high interest rates, high CPI. That's what low cost would be. High cost is the exact opposite. Low growth, low inflation, low CPI or earnings growth. And of course, participation in workforce as well. All right, so let's go. Let's keep going here. The sustainable trend level of GDP is almost 3% higher for 2029 through 2024 in this year's report than in 2023. So they added not 3%. That's not like a GDP is now 3%, whereas before it was 0. It's just 3% higher than what it was. So it's still the sustainable trend level of GDP is almost 3% higher for 2029 through 2024. 2045 this year than it was at the end of 2023. So we had a better growth than they expected, which is good. We want higher growth to fund Social Security. Good stuff. So here's productivity. Total U.S. economy productivity is defined as the ratio of real GDP to hours worked by all workers. All right, let me repeat that. Total U.S. productivity is defined as, get out of here, Skeeter Bug, is defined as the ratio of real GDP, that's after inflation is taken out, to hours worked by all workers. The rate of change in total economy productivity is a major determinant in the growth of average earnings. All right, the rate of change in total economic productivity is a major determinant in the growth of average earnings, and average earnings growth is important. Why? Why is average earnings growth important? Anybody? Looking at you out there, looking at you. Because growth of average earnings are what our average wage index is based on, which is the indexing amount that you use before you get your COLAs. All right, we can keep going with that. Over the last 6 economic cycles, the annual increase in total economy productivity averaged 2.4, 2.6, 1.06, 1.39, 1.8. You can see all that. But you can see we haven't got anywhere above 2% other than from the 1969 to 1973 cycle, which was the beginning of the massive inflation. Isn't that interesting? Now, let's keep going. The assumed ultimate annual increase in total economy productivity is 1.93 for low cost, 1.63 for intermediate, and 1.33 for high cost assumptions, which are unchanged from 2023. I think they said, yeah, right here, from 1969 to 2019, the total economy productivity grew by 1.5%. So they're expecting a higher productivity increase over the next 75 years than they were for the previous 75 years. Well, not 75, but 55 years, if that makes sense. So we'll see. 1.63 versus 1.59 might not seem like much, but that's 40 basis. 4 basis points compounding for many, many years. That's a big deal. So we'll see. We'll see if they're right. And here's right here. The annual increase in the CPI averaged 4.9, 8.54, 5.3, 2.7, 2.63, and 1.7 over the economic cycles from 1960. You can see all that from 1969 to 1973, 73 to 79, 79 to 90, 90 to 2001, 2001 to 2007, and 2007 to 2019. So you can see it's gone down rapidly from 8.54 to 5.3, 2.73, 2.63, 1.73. So the annual increase in CPI has gone down dramatically. But the government's printing all that money. How could inflation have gone down? Oh, because they're not measuring like they did in 1978. The whole thing's stupid. Inflation has gone down dramatically, even though with the government printing money. So all these people with their government, the printing machine goes burr, and inflation goes through the roof. It's just freaking dumb. BLS produces a series called the Consumer Price Index Research Series using current methods, CPIU.RS, current methods, that approximates the measured rate of inflation since 1978 had the method currently used been in effect then. Right, because they did change the current rate of how they judge inflation, CPI. They got rid of literally mortgage interest, property tax, and things like that, and they replaced that with OER, owner's equivalent rent, which is boggles my mind, because if you own your house outright, why do you care how much it costs to rent your house to yourself? Doesn't make sense, but that's what they did. And if you don't believe me, read my book, Relax and Retire. The BLS does not revise the CPI values published in earlier years. So it doesn't, even though they made the changes from 1978, they don't revise it. Oh, by the way, they made changes well before that too, as I talk about in my book, Relax and Retire. I show you the changes that the BLS made in terms of what the methodology was used, because I go back to inflation, in terms of transportation, food, and housing were the big three. Going back as far back as, apparel was a significant part of CPI back in the 30s. Apparel is not anything anymore, hardly. It's nuts. Transportation, I just show you how they change these things. How food and apparel were huge. Transportation wasn't that big, then transportation came on. Healthcare is coming on now. So they don't change the CPI numbers to reflect the current modern methodology of constructing CPI. Very interesting. All right, so here's where it gets what you care about. So we're 7 minutes into it, so I'm glad you're still here. If you're still here and you haven't subscribed, what's wrong with you? Subscribe. Please subscribe. I'm not begging you. Please subscribe. 50% of you are subscribed. The assumed ultimate annual increase in the CPI is 3%, 2.4, and 1.8 respectively for the low cost, intermediate, and high cost assumptions. So 2.4, and that's exactly what I use for my COLAs in Right Capital. That's exactly what I used, 2.4. So that's not changed. So I was using 2.6 a number of years ago, and they dropped it down to 2.4, and that's what we're using, 2.4 in my Right Capital. So 3% is low cost. Again, high CPI is better for Social Security. 1.8 is low CPI, is worse for Social Security. Let's see here. And so what you'll see here for the intermediate assumptions, which is what we're using, 2.4, the annual rate of change in CPI is 2.76 in 2024, 2.32 in 2025, until it reaches the ultimate growth of 2.4% in 2026 and thereafter. So that's what I'm using in my Social Security adjustments in Right Capital. If someone's using 3% or higher than that for Social Security, I'd want to know why, because we're just showing it right here. CPI is 2.4. That's what you should use for your COLAs and Social Security. Why are you using something different than that? So let's keep going. I thought this was interesting. Changes in oil prices affect the CPI much more than this other thing called the GDP and deflator, because oil comprises a much larger share of U.S. consumption than of U.S. production. All right, so we just care about consumption. I get production is what we consuming things that have been produced. I get you, but our bottom line is based on consumption, the increase in price of consumption. Changes in oil price affect the CPI much more. Oil prices are assumed to grow at a relatively stable rate in the future. We're going to talk about oil in just a second here because it's a big deal. Commodities, a big deal in inflation? What? The size of the tax, here, average earnings assumptions. This is going to be AWI right here, average wage index. The size of the taxable payroll, the main source of the old age survivor disability insurance program, for each year depends primarily on the nominal earnings in OAS, that's before inflation or with inflation, if you will, nominal earnings and employment, which is the product of covered employment for the year and average covered earnings for the year. The level of average covered earnings also affect the future level of average benefits. In addition, the average reported annual wage in the U.S. economy determines the national average wage index. Under the automatic adjustment provisions in the law, the growth of AWI affects the contribution and benefit base, certain parameters used in the benefit formula. All right, so AWI is a big deal. So the size of the taxable payroll plus CPI is a big deal when it comes to future increases, or it won't be decreases, but future adjustments in your Social Security benefit. For sure, man. Let's keep going here. Pause. For the period 1969 to 2019, covering the last 6 complete economic cycles, the annual real inflation adjustment growth rate on the average covered wage averaged 0.77%. All right, 0.77% is what it was. And you can see right here, it was 0.76 from 2007 to 2019, 0.8, 1.4, 0.46, 0.03. You can see it's been all over the place. They assumed real wage growth. Real wage growth. So you can see right here, 1973 to 79, it was only 0.03 because inflation was through the roof. Basically, your wages would barely keep up with inflation. Right there, under the, let's see, 1, 2, 3, under the, right there, that'd be under the Bush and Clinton years, the real wage was growing through the roof relative to everything else, which is why Clinton got reelected in 1996. For the period of 2033 to 2098, the projected average annual real wage growth for the intermediate assumption will be 1.14, which is interesting because you can see right here, it averaged only 0.77 since 1969 to 2019. So they're assuming real wage growth is going to grow by 1.14, which is not a doubling, but I mean, that's a significant increase and over what it did the last basically 50 years or so. That seems odd to me, but okay, that's for intermediate. Low cost, the assumed real growth in wages would be 1.74% each and every year. High cost would be 0.53. Let's see what else we got here. I just find this stuff is great. Principal economic assumptions, CPI, you can see right here. It tells you all things. You have productivity, GDP, price index, average workers, and just tons of stuff in your economic cycles. Singly, it's just fun. We're having some fun. Gotta have fun in the sun. Gotta have fun. The annual rate of growth as the size of the labor force decreased. The annual rate of growth in the size of the labor force decreased from an average of about 2.6% during the 1969 to 1973 economic cycle to 1.7%. Now all the way down to 0.5%. The annual rate of growth in the size of the labor force went from 2.6 and 2.7 in the 70s to 0.5% in the last 12-year cycles. Crazy. Going forward, labor force growth is projected to be 1% in 2024, but averaging 0.6% for the next 5 years, and then 0.4% for the next 5 years after that. The long-term growth rate of the labor force is expected to remain subdued due to slowing growth of the working-age population. The consequence of the baby boom generation reaching retirement ages and lower birth rates among you, right there. I'm looking at you. I got 4 kids. What are you doing to keep Social Security afloat? Oh, they need to fix Social Security. How many kids you got? Are you like John Scott, my man John Scott out there? I think he's got 8 kids. I got 4. I'm not a legend like John Scott, but what are you doing? Where are the kids? You pushed them out? Don't complain about Social Security if you don't have kids. Push them out, man. Under the intermediate assumptions, the labor force is projected to grow by an average of 0.3% a year. 0.3 from 2033 to 2098. That's a bad thing. But the immigration is going to fix it. No one ever voted on that. Why don't we just have native-born Americans from your own getting jiggy with your wife, huh? The assumed ultimate sex-adjusted unemployment rate is 4.5 for intermediate assumptions, 3.5 for low cost, and 5.5 for the high cost. All right, anyway, right here. For the intermediate assumptions, the average annual growth rate in real GDP, that's after you factor in inflation, is 2% from 2023 to 2033, and from 2033 it's going to be 1.9. What's up, baby? Oh, it's chasing squirrels. Keep them out of my garden. Thank you. Let's keep going here. Yeah, I think that's all I got. Well, we got a couple of things here. Oh, right here. The real interest rate averaged, let's see. Let's say what it averaged right there. I guess it doesn't. It doesn't say. It says what right there. 1.6. Yeah, 1.6. The real interest rate, I don't know. Is that right? 1.6? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, I guess it's not. Oh, right here. The real interest rate averaged 2.4% a year from 1969 to 2019. Under the intermediate cost, they're expecting 2.3%. Real is net of inflation, by the way. All right. And then lastly, when combined with the ultimate CPI assumptions of 2.4%, the assumed ultimate real interest rate produce an ultimate nominal. They say ultimate 1, 2, 3 times in one sentence. That's not good. You don't want to say that three times the same sentence. When combined with the CPI assumptions of 2.4, the assumed real interest rate produce a nominal interest rate of 5.8% for low cost and 4.7% in intermediate cost. Anyway, all right, so that's all we're going to talk about here. I got other stuff in here that's just fun. Additional economic factors. I just enjoy this very much. Labor force participation, total unemployment, real GDP, real net of inflation, nominal interest rates, real interest rates, unemployment rates, intermediate unemployment rates 4.5, low cost is 3.5, high cost is 5.5. As you can see, or 5.5 right there. And you can see the GDP right here. There's colas, I should say, for intermediate. Where was it? I don't have the colas in here. It was on the other graph. Did I show you guys the other graph? I can't remember. But it was 2.4. So there you go, man. Some fun with Social Security Trustees report. And it's available free of cost to any enterprising fool like me who wants to read this stuff. And I love your thoughts. God bless.